Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to the Unfuck Your Biz podcast. As always, this is your host, Braden, and today I'm very excited because I am joined by one of my good industry friends, Ashley Ebert, who is the owner of the Simply Elegant Group, which is one of the largest wedding and event planning companies with 9 locations and 40 team members here in the lovely United States. And Ashley is also the owner of the Abundance Group, which is an education-based company for creatives. Ashley, how's it going?
I am good. I'm excited. I always love hanging out with you and your content because we get to get into the good nitty gritty stuff. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, same. I always like to hang out and talk about stuff because Ashley, although you're not a fellow legal nerd like myself, I know that you take these topics very seriously in your own business and you have your shit together, which is why we invited you to come on to talk about hiring.
Yeah, I mostly have my shit together. But,
well, in the areas where it's pertinent to this conversation.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Don't see the chaos in my 3-year-old flying around out there, but
well, your video backdrop looks lovely.
Oh, thanks. So. Yes, book. I read all those books. Those are legit.
Yes. I do not have any children, but I am probably going to have to go out into our back patio here and clean up dog poops after this interview.
It's just different kind of kids.
Different kind of chaos. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about your business. First, let me set the stage. So what we're going to talk about here is getting started with building a team. So specifically employees. So all of you that are tuning in, we're in the middle of what I'm calling my hiring series. We started out with the whole can you have contractors? Do you need employees? If you need contractors, how do you onboard those? And if you determine that you can't have contractors, you need to have employees. Ashley's going to talk to us about it. But Ashley, I'm also going to lean on you to do a little bit of pitching on just because you're not legally required to have employees, here's why it's still a good idea. You still might want to do it to build your business, right? But before we get there, tell everyone a little bit more about your business/businesses and what you got going on.
Yeah, so I started in the business world when I was 23 and thought I knew everything. So it quickly fell apart. No, I started in the planning world. I wasn't a photographer or a florist or anything like that. I loved people and I loved problem solving. So I found my place as a wedding planner. The other thing I always mention, my ace in my back pocket is actually my dad, Dale. He is a leadership and team development coach in the corporate world. So he's worked with Fortune 500 companies from around the world. So of course, when I was 23, I had quite a bit of influence from him. So when I started my business, I was always thinking about my business as an asset. It wasn't a hobby-based business. It was something I did want to grow. Now, I will say, I didn't think it was going to be 9 locations and a team of 40, but I did think that I was going to potentially want the opportunity to bring on people. So although that's part of my story, a lot of people we work with, again, at the Abundance Group, that's not how they started. They really fell into it and they want to start to get intentional. But then from there, I've had contractors. I now have employees. I have salaried employees. I have part-time employees. And it's been something, honestly, and this is going to sound, for those of you that have hung out with me at all, I say this all the time, the greatest joy of my career was building my team. One, because it freed up my time to do what I really love to do, but also to watch my team flourish and to build something that's bigger than myself feels so incredible. So that's really kind of the heart of where I came from and kind of where we're at now. And like I say, we have a very large team of wedding planners in the US here. And it's something that it's different work. I just hopped off another call with some of our students, and it's just different work when you build a team. But I feel it's so valuable. The work is so valuable that we do when we build a team.
So you started your business when you were 23. How long were you in business before you hired your first employee?
About 6 months. We 6 literally, months. Because the thing for me, Braden, is I didn't want to give up double booking dates. So once I started to have the demand, I wanted to figure out a solution. I wanted to figure out a way that my company could serve those couples and not say no. And I was like, okay, how do I do this? And that's actually where the contractor hack came in. This is decades ago when I was 23. And let me tell you, I probably did everything wrong, just straight up. I had a friend that worked for me. It was very a one-off, and then she rocked it. And I was like, cool, you want to come back some more? And it was kind of that, the evolution there. But again, like I never named the company after myself because it was always going to be bigger than me. So it's always been Simply Elegant, right? It's not, Ashley and photography, which I see some people get into that problem with, which again, we have solutions around. But so for me, it was always bigger than that. So we actually were able to do that pretty quickly once we really had the demand of double booking dates.
Do you think like having dad around kind of like emotionally prepared you and pre-sold you on that idea like early on so that you were able to make the leap earlier?
1,000%. Of course. He always drops things in front of me like 4 years. He's like, hey Ash, another integral time he did this, he was talking to me about basically prepping me to go multi-market. He said, Ashley, you're not a wedding planner, you're an entrepreneur. And I said, that's funny. No, I'm a wedding planner. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I was so thick in the work of like client stuff, client issues, conflict management, problem solving, all the things. That I was like, I don't think of myself as a small business owner. I'm a wedding planner. And lo and behold, I haven't personally been a wedding in about 5 years. So you know what he was talking about, and then he planted the seed a couple of years ago of like, you're going to go international. And I was like, that's not happening. So we'll see to come, I'm sure. He always does that to me.
I like that journey for you. That sounds like it could be really fun. So
you and Dale.
Yeah, me and Dale can connect on this. I think Dale and I are kindred spirits when it comes to systems. Right. So the reason why I asked that question is I'm assuming, and I would love your insights, is because you have a program where you're helping your students, I'm assuming you help them students, build their team. And we're going to talk more about that program. But do you see, I'm assuming once people join your program, they're already sold on hiring employees, but what's the pre-selling process like? Like, do you have a lot of people who can afford it? Like, it's not really an issue, but they're still really resistant, or what does that look like?
Great question. So there's a couple of mindset in every buying decision or in any big change, right? We always have mindset hurdles. So the ones that like, I'm sure somebody hanging out and listening to this right now feels this way. Like, I wouldn't be a good leader. It's really expensive to onboard a team. I don't want to be a boss. I don't want to be a manager. And these are all complete mindset blocks for me, honestly. And just because I've lived it and I know there's passive income on products and things like that, but I believe that building a team is the only true way to stop trading time for money and take off the burden of everyday business decision making. And again, there's passive products, but you're still having to do a lot of work. Like, let's all be honest, like, you don't just like create a course and then go to sleep and you wake up a millionaire. Like, there's so many components to it you're still in charge for. But when you build a team, someone else is making decisions and doing work on your behalf. That's magical. It is magical when you trust and have team members that love your business and love your vision. And I know, like, in Simply Elegant, my manager director, her name is Lindsay Mackey. She's like one of my favorite human beings on the planet. She is such a powerhouse. She is so smart, so good with people. And I trust her to make decisions. And that is such a cool thing, to go be on vacation for 2 weeks and just know that anything that comes up, she's got it and it's fine. And you can't do that without surrounding yourself with a team. All those emails are just sitting in your inbox. You're gonna have to deal with them later. Right. So there's something magical in that. And I think the mindset block of like, I'm not a good leader. Well, first of all, spoiler alert, leadership is a skill. It's not a personality characteristic. Not all extroverts are like awesome leaders. Like, that's not how that works. So it's just a skill to learn it. And there's principles around what it is, but also, costly. Well, if you know your numbers, which Braden, obviously you teach everybody about, like, once you're armed with that knowledge, you're going to see it actually is something that you can evolve. You don't have to hire a $100,000 salaried person and offer them all the benefits in the world just to start a team. Like, it doesn't start that way unless you have a lot of capital and that's how you want to spend it. But a lot of like I say, people that participate in our intensives, like, they're mom and pop shops, they're booking, they want to double book dates, but they're kind of like, how do I take advantage and have this opportunity not just pass me by? And really, when we can kind of put those to rest. That, again, I won't be a good leader. I can't afford it. I don't even want to deal with people. When you could put those things aside, really, I say, the ceiling just blows off the potential for your business, because when you're starting to build team members and build processes in place, it exponentially adds value to your organization, because for every hour you're, spending building your SOPs or hiring a person, that's going to pay dividends for you in the future. So I'm sure you can tell I'm a little passionate about building your team.
Just a little bit.
It's so true. It's so true. It's given me the life that I love. And that's the thing of like, my husband stays at home with our daughter. I get to work when I want. I go back and forth between in my office and go and hang out with them. Like, I just want that for everybody. Like, I want you to have the life you want. And I think team is it feels like such a big, scary step, but it's really not. It really, really isn't. It's something that's attainable for probably almost everybody listening today.
Yeah, I have so many follow-up questions on on objections, specifically mindset objections. We'll probably sprinkle those in. Let's circle back to a few.
Yeah.
What I am curious, and you started alluding to this, is specifically, like, how do you know when it's time to hire? What are the telltale signs? And even more specifically, like, I don't want to get too into the weeds with like dicking around with contractors, because I already talk about all that all the time.
And I ain't going to talk about it, because I know smart people that talk about that better than I do.
Yeah. So let's assume that some of our listeners maybe already have contractors. Like, they've hired a VA, they've hired, they have day of assistants, whatever. But what are the signals? When is the universe? What does it look like when the universe is starting to tell them, like, hey girl, it's maybe time to hire your first employee?
Get you some help. This is a really great question. We just talked about this. I hopped off a call with our intensive group and hopped onto this. We were talking about this idea of like, don't wait until you are 100% booked, because now you actually don't have time in your life to hire and onboard well.
Right.
It's not too late, but it's way harder. It's way harder to do it when you're at max capacity. So we say a sweet spot, and I'm all about tangibles and like real world applications of things. So looking at your calendar, if you're sitting at 75%, 80%, like, let's start thinking about what it would look like to build a team. I don't want you to sit and I'm overbooked and overwhelmed, and now I'm trying to onboard this new human being in my organization. Again, I have done it that way. Like, it works, you can do it. It's just a lot more stressful. So if we can be a little bit more proactive and be closer to that 75% mark, that's going to give you a little bit better balance. And probably you're going to hire better, because you're going to have bandwidth in your mind to ask the right questions, to give energy to the hiring process. You're going to be able to train and onboard better and have time to do that. So that's kind of our rule of thumb. And like I say, literally, we were just talking about that in our intensive. So
if we take a step back from that, I'm assuming that you need to know, like, to know when you're 80% booked, like, you first have to know, like, how many, if you're an event professional, how many events you want to take per year, right?
Yeah.
Do most of the people you work with, like, they already have that figured out? I would kind of assume by the time they're starting to think about employees.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple of years, you're kind of trying to figure out what's your capacity, how much money do I really need? Like, will I take this 40th wedding because I need to pay my rent? Yeah, we figure that out. But I think organically, a lot of pros kind of understand where their balance is. And again, my experience, my team's experience, again, we're planners. We can usually balance 20 to 25 weddings a year and feel pretty, that's a good place to be in. Anything over in that teetering into the 30, 35, it starts to get like a lot of work on the planner's plate. Now, I've heard photographers that can rock and roll with 40 to 50 weddings. So really knowing where you land in that, I think, is good. But just for some, like I say, numbers or figures within my organization, that's something that's good. So again, if you have 15 or 20 weddings on your books, let's start thinking about it. Let's start thinking about how a team could help your bottom line.
Yeah, I had a photography student who shot 54 weddings in 2019. And I was like, okay, why don't you have an assistant?
Let me get you help.
Because
the great thing is you can send someone else to that wedding and still make money on it. Y'all. Like, that's magical. That's awesome. And they're making money. which is so
Another
cool
one of those
too.
mindset blocks is a lot of it. And this, I think maybe more so for photographers, but definitely everyone in the creative space is like, this is my creative art and no one else can do it like I can. We could
Oh,
talk
I don't
about
trust
that.
anybody with my brand. Oh,
Yeah.
I've never heard that one, Braden.
Never heard
No,
that one. That could be a whole episode, but
I totally could.
I
Totally
do
could.
want to also just talk for a minute about determining this. Okay, I'm at 80% capacity. It's time for me to think about hiring.
Mhm.
What would you tell to someone that's not in the event space? So someone like a graphic designer, right? You're
Mhm.
not looking at like you're not looking at days. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit more amorphous to figure out what your 80% capacity is.
I still feel like you're going to have a good idea of client load. So if
Yeah.
you have like retainer clients that you really need like 4 a month to feel good, and then you pepper in some one-off contracts, like you're kind of going to know your capacity. And here's the other thing. This is a little like nerdy and technical, but like document your hours. How much are you working on client work? How much are you working on in your business? And I mean, I have worked 100-hour work weeks. Now I am a recovering alcoholic, so like, or recovering workaholic. And it's that idea of like, how do you balance this job you love so much? And really, when do I outsource? And how, like you said, do I trust the brand with somebody else? But you have to think about prolonged work at that level. Like if I was working 100-hour work weeks for 10 years, I would be like, nope, sorry, corporate job, bye. Like I can't do it for a season, for probably 18 months longer than I should have. Because again, workaholic, like I could do that. My capacity was there. But I think if you're kind of completely unaware, just start documenting your hours. And it doesn't have to be really like time consuming to do it, but just watch yourself. Like how much are you actually working in your office, out in client meetings, whatever. And if you have a lot of work and you want less work, that's a great place to get into hire people. And here's the thing is if you're working a lot, assumingly you're making money as you're doing client work. So, the more work you have, the more money you're making. If you're working on client facing work. So again, I think that's a really good way to just gauge it, which again, some entrepreneurs like have no idea how much time they're working. So it's a good practice to have.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta, like, you gotta just have that moment where you're going to sit down and think about what are my packages? What am I charging? How much am I working? All that kind of stuff. So threshold issue there for us folks.
Yeah.
Okay, Ashley. So you've done that. You've kind of determined, I think I'm ready to hire, or I'm not ready. I'm not emotionally ready to hire, but based on Ashley's guidance, I know that I probably should be looking into hiring.
Yeah.
Let's talk about money. Like how often do you see people who are at that 80% capacity, but are really freaked out about the money, either justifiably so, or it's like a mindset issue. So I think we have people who can definitely afford it. They're afraid, but then do you also have people who are not running like good enough profit in their business to be where they need to be to start to hire?
That's a great question. And one of the things that we have, very baseline they're doing some level of financial forecasting.
Good.
So you're understanding, and it was, right. Okay. So I'm in the wedding world. 2020 was a hell of a year for us. Everybody, we're still alive. Yes. Thank God. Like we made it. But you can't really financially forecast with that in the mix. So you're doing some level of, and again, Braden, I'm sure you cover this in much more detail in your Facebook group and in your courses, but you're doing some level of understanding where the business is going to be in a year's, 2 years, whatever. You're going to look at what you've done in the past, what your, inquiries, what your marketing, what your lead gen is. There are certain KPIs or key performance indicators you can be watching in your business that will give you an indication of growth. And those are the things we're looking for. And again, honestly, those are obviously tied to profitability and money. But there's definitely people where if you're not charging enough, it becomes pretty apparent that if you're charging $500 for the wedding and you have to pay somebody $400 and the cost per acquisition of the client is $200, like that's not good math. That's not going to work for you.
Would you agree with the following statement that if someone is already at 80% capacity and they literally can't afford to hire an employee, then there's something off with their numbers?
Yes, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
So they probably are either need to be charging more or spending less.
Yeah. Or just look at your time. Where are you really spending your time? And is it what your client actually needs? and there's some learning we do when we're all new entrepreneurs and we're learning how to build a timeline or create a graphic design or create a logo. Like you get more and more efficient with your skill set over time. But if literally, you're saying, okay, again, I'm charging $500. It's taking me, 40 hours to do this. You can't, that's not duplicatable. So we either need to evaluate one side of the equation, the time I'm investing or the money that I'm charging.
Yeah, like stop charging $50 for like portrait sessions, photographers.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, you can do that if you want to burn yourself out quickly and not ever, remove yourself from the business, because you just can't, again, you can't pay someone $60 for a $50 contract. Like everybody knows in theory that doesn't work. So how do we do that? And again, sometimes it's a marketing. Like I always say, there's a lot of conversation of like, just raise your rates. And I'm like, that's great. If you're in a place where your business can withstand raising your rates, that's great. The one thing to think about is there's often a little bit of a lag in the market, because when you're making that price increase, 20%, whatever, your marketing to that ideal client has to pivot and kind of shift over time with it too. And it takes a little bit for the market to catch up sometimes. So just be cognizant of that. So if you are raising your rates, it may take you a little while there's your clients and your market to kind of catch up to where your rates are. And that's okay. That happens. But again, this is the evolution and being strategic in business of what are our goals? What do we really want? That's the beauty in entrepreneurship. We get to create our life. We get to create every moment of our life. Nobody tells us what to do or when to do it. So just make sure that you're doing the things you really want to do. And again, if that is building a team, that we're creating that structure or that trajectory within our overall path.
Yeah, Ashley, when it comes to pricing, I think you'll kind of like this analogy or this story. I've talked to some of my students about how my husband took me to like a very, very fancy restaurant for my 30th birthday. We were in New York City. It's like $800 per person. It's something that you do like, once in a lifetime or once in a decade, right?
Yeah.
And we're there at this restaurant, like 9 courses, wine, the whole thing. And I feel like part of me feels like uncomfortable and out of place. Like I don't belong here. I'm like looking around at everyone.
Most places. So like,
right?
Yeah.
I'm looking around and I'm just assuming that everyone around here like comes here for Friday dinner every week, when in reality, it could be their once in a lifetime like dinner, right? And I think we actually do that sometimes in our pricing. It's like if you raise your prices too quickly, you actually can get uncomfortable with like the level that you're operating at. And it does take some time to adjust for sure.
Yeah, it's that confidence, building your own confidence about like what you're selling. So perfect example of this is when I onboarded employees, I raised my rates significantly. It was time in my business. It kind of all those shifts were happening at the same time. And I raised my rates about 20%. And I was terrified. And like, you have to know that the worth of yourself, your organization, your team, your experience, all the things that makes your business valuable, like you have to recalibrate a little bit. And that just takes practice. So like
do you think that affected your, I'll say like performance, for lack of a better term, on when it came to like your sales calls, like for a little bit?
Gosh, probably, because it was so long ago, honestly. But I think
you just kind of like you power through, right? It's like maybe for like 1 or 2 months, my conversion rates are going to dip 10%, but that's okay. Like we're going to work through it.
I mean, there are people that sell 5-figure photography wedding planning packages. And here's the thing, like for me, my team is incredible. The experience my team creates is incredible. Our start price is not 5 figures. Being able to say like, there's people out there that just own it and charge it. Now they have to, actually deliver what they're telling the clients. Otherwise there's a pattern disrupt and social proof falls through. We don't get the reviews, all of that, right? Like you have to be able to deliver, but really the sales process, it is really being confident and understanding that what you're saying the value of your services is actually what you can provide for them. So yeah, I mean, all of us, right? We all evolve. Like nobody, podcast hosts, guests on podcasts, 7-figure business, like we all don't know what we're doing. We're just like trying to help each other out and, explain stuff. Like we screw up too. And we have these moments where we're like, did I just do that right? Or wow, that really failed. But I think the part is the thing where the rubber meets the road for entrepreneurs is that you're willing to fail often, fail hard, but you're always going to get back up. You're always going to build that confidence. So if you are seeing, hey, okay, I raised my rates 20%, my conversion rates are off, the product is phenomenal, the team is great, that's a me issue. Okay, how can I pour into that? What can I do? So that's really like, how are we moving the needle forward and owning that? And again, in control of what we build our business to be.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's circle back for a quick minute and talk about on the topic of money, right?
Yeah.
What, from your experience, is like the actual cost of hiring an employee? Like, someone wants to hire an employee, what's it going to cost them to do that?
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, there's like, right, all the taxes and, 7.5% and all that stuff. And we could go, and I have lists for that. If y'all want it, come find me, I'll give you the lists. But really it's about, yes, that's important. And the thing that I think people get caught up in is there's a lot of costs to an employee, right? Their wages, any taxes that we have, any additional added cost to the business, like a payroll company or new softwares you have to have. There are a lot of costs, but again, back to pricing, it's not going to be more expensive than not having a team, because your profits that you have, when you can double book a date, right? You have twice the revenue. If you can do 2 of the exact same weddings, whereas you couldn't before, right? The costs that you have aren't going to incur more than you're going to bring in revenue. So I don't want people to get caught up in saying like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive to have an employee. There are costs associated with it, but it doesn't have to be extremely costly, if that makes sense. And
I like to get in, I mostly like to get into the cost so that people can start to imagine what their ROI is actually going to be, right?
Yeah.
So what I've often heard, and this is more or less true from what I've seen, but it's going to vary based on a lot of factors. But typically, from my experience, it's going to cost you 20 to 30% more to have an employee rather than a contractor. Do you think that's about correct?
I'm going to push back a little bit there.
Okay.
Just because we're friends and we can. I think really you're going to pay a contractor significantly more for their work, because essentially they would own their own business. They'd have more experience and expertise. An employee, you're able to pay them less per hour, and probably significantly less per hour, because you're training them. You're providing consistency for them in whatever fashion that you have an agreed upon arrangement. Again, if that's salary, that they're going to have 40 hours of work and they're going to get paid for that. For a part-time or a seasonal employee, right? That this is the scope of work. This is what I'm essentially taking the risk as the employer to guarantee you, essentially, like, right, you're going to have this work during holiday season, or you're going to be able to do 20 weddings a year or whatever. So I think you should be able to pay significantly less. And again, not that you're not valuing your employee, but that you're giving them other benefits like security, like again, paid time off, and negotiating benefits is kind of a whole, again, we could do another episode on that. But so I don't think it necessarily has to be that employees at the end of the day are 20 to 30% more costly.
Yeah, I like that. It's an important to note, because it's an important thing to note, because to bring this kind of full circle, what I'll tell people is, when you pay their taxes and all these kind of things, assuming that you're going to pay an employee and a contractor the same amount per hour, the employee is going to cost you about 20% more. So example, if you were paying a contractor $50 an hour, it's going to end up costing you $60 to $65 an hour after you pay for their benefits. Right. So what do? This gets to what Ashley was just mentioning, is instead, let's pay them $40 an hour. But when you go to hire them, you need to explain to them why. Well, I mean, you might not really need to sell them on it, but if they ask questions, these are all the benefits that you're getting, right?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I think that's a really good point, though, is that the end of the day is, again, all circling back to, if you know your numbers, it doesn't need to cost you more. And also you can derive a lot more value out of an employee than you can a contractor, which is harder to track on a spreadsheet for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say too, especially in the creative entrepreneur space, that consistency is craved by people in the creative community. If you are guaranteed work, like we've had people that have closed their small business, their wedding planning company, and came and worked for us because the consistency was so valuable to them. And we were happy to provide that. and it worked well for them. And again, you're not like telling them you're going to pay them a certain amount and then like bamboozling them when they like get their paycheck. Like, of course you're very like clear of like, this is what we can offer for compensation. But again, you should like, I should assume I'm going to pay more for a contractor because they're more experienced. They have all the overhead. They're going to have probably been in the game longer. I know that I'm going to have less risk with a contractor theoretically, and if all things generalized, because they do this for a living. But as an employee, I'm probably going to have to groom and train. I'm probably going to have to also say, I'm going to have to make some concessions. I'm going to have to be more agile and more mobile because I'm going to want them to stay for a long time. So again, the trade-off there monetarily, I think if you're intentional and strategic, employees don't have to cost more money. They have more costs associated with them, right. Again, like employer tax and things like that. But when you know what those are, you can rectify that or kind of balance that out.
Okay, so let's assume someone sold now on hiring their employee.
Yeah.
What's the process like? So I want to start by talking about like the boring process, the process people expect to hear on Unfuck Your Biz. So legal and tax process. Do they need to hire, from your experience, do you think they need to hire an employment attorney? Is it easy to do just through a payroll company? How do your students manage the paperwork? I'm going to call it the paperwork problem with hiring.
Yeah. So great question. So there's a couple like principles we operate within at the Abundance Group. And one is that every business is different. Every business owner is different. And they have different things that keep them awake at night. Right. For example, if the whole independent contractor versus employee debate keeps you up at night, just hire an employee, like, let's be done with it. Then, check box. But if you're not as worried about it, or, again, we just all care about different things. So if for your business, you really want to make sure it makes your heart happy when you have ironclad contracts, spend the capital to do that, work with someone local in your area that knows your employment law in your state, because right, they differ state to state, and they actually differ city, locally to state to federal. And we won't get into that because that's, for another episode. But if that's what keeps you awake at night, let's mitigate that and let's work with someone that can really go through that with a fine-tooth comb, create exactly what you want. Now, obviously, you can buy if that's not as big of a concern, and you want to buy a template and then have a local attorney look at it. So a more cost-effective way. And I always think whenever you're onboarding a team, contractor, employee, expectations and having accountabilities is really important. So when you're onboarding, that's where documentation like an employee handbook, all the, things that you're talking about, I think are really important. And really, so everybody understands the agreement in which they are entering into and what this job should be, won't be. And again, kind of that understanding is set on the outset of the relationship. So from that, I think there's, again, a different way. And it's all about what you feel as a business owner will help you lay your head on your pillow at night and feel good about, what you've built. But there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I mean, I think at least having something outlined. I personally, I'm more on the side of, I have a big organization, so I'm open to a lot of risk. So I need to be a bit more protective of the assets of what we've built. We have more to lose, right? I know people that don't have anything in writing and they do what they want. It's the Wild Wild West. Like, I don't agree with that personally, but has it been done ever? Yeah, probably, yeah, people do it. But again, personal preference. And I'm sure yours too, Braden.
Yeah, I always find with employment law, I mean, this is true for every area. It's just there's some areas where I'm more knowledgeable and more confident. I can tell people with absolute certainty and clarity what they need. Employment law is one of these areas, though, where it's really hard to decipher between the things that you legally have to do and the things that are just like an industry, like good idea. Like an employee handbook is a great example. Like, do we have to have that? Is it just a good idea? It's kind of a gray area. Really, it's like a helpful tool.
The other thing we talk a lot about, and we talk about this in legal and in like finance and CPA and taxes and all that stuff, this idea of operating in good faith. Like, at the end of the day, I promise there's things I'm not doing perfectly. Like right now, currently in my big business that I have, like there's probably things I am not doing perfectly by the book as again, like city laws change. I have 9 locations. Like I'm doing my very best and I'm very knowledgeable about things. But at some piece of this, we have to take action. And if we're completely paralyzed by making the decision, we're actually not moving the needle in our business. And I think, and again, I surround ourselves with you, Braden, other lawyer friends, other CPAs that kind of have this belief of if you're really doing your best and you're being intentional about it, trust and believe and like have faith in yourself and this idea of, yeah, I'm operating in good faith. Like I am not doing anything morally corrupt. I am not paying attention to that law because I don't want to. Like if you're operating in a space where you're truly trying to do your very best, you're going to be okay. Like we're going to figure it out.
Yeah. What you're like when you teach about good faith, like legally, what you're really getting into is the difference between like negligence and fraud. Like in fraud.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
If you're not being you're not going to keep yourself totally out of hot water just by not being fraudulent, but you're going to keep yourself out of like the big steep penalties, right?
Yeah.
It's a slap on the wrist versus like, the scary stuff.
Yeah. And again, speaking to a lawyer and saying that is rather ballsy on my end, like, hey, do what you want. But it is that idea of like, I think so much, and I'm sure your community too, Braden, it's like we get in these moments where like, we just sit in the fear of like making the wrong decision. And that is the worst version of what the future looks like, where you just don't even take on the opportunity because you're so afraid of the decision you're going to make. And again, I think part of good faith is like you surround yourself with good people. You have good advisors that are pouring into your business to help you get good advice. Like there's a responsibility we have in that. But I also think like it's a worse tragedy for me that people won't build teams because they're afraid they're going to do it wrong when they could have a 7-figure business and could do what they really wanted to do, but they won't even open that door because of that. So,
yeah,
and I'm sure like I said, you have that too.
Our cautionary tale to everyone is don't get stuck procrastinating researching. That's what I call it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Because by the time you make a decision, the law changed already anyway, let's be honest.
Yes. All right. So kind of the last topic I want to talk about on the podcast here today is what does the process look like once you've actually made the hire? So you've gone through all the paperwork, and I'm sure that you probably have a whole step-by-step system that you teach your students.
Yeah.
But just broad outline, like how do you get them up to speed and trained to do their job like under your brand?
Yeah. So, I think you can have SOPs or standard operating procedures that are really particular, robust. If that's part of your culture, if you're more of an analytical mind and you hire on analytical people, that can be a good way to equip them well. If you want to build your SOPs as you go, like you can do that too. Like there's no wrong way to build what there's no wrong way to build your business, right? But really it's this idea of like, you want to have a certain level of expectation set out on front. You want to have consistent communication, especially in the beginning stages. So again, let's say you're hiring, in my world, in the wedding world, let's say you're hiring on another lead planner for peak season. You're going to give them 10 weddings that they're going to execute between May and November. The first couple of months, the first couple of timeline meetings, the first couple of vendor meetings, maybe you're having more consistent conversation and you're checking in with them. Are they equipped with what they need? How is the environment? Are we playing to your strengths? How's everything going? But then after a while, that trust is being built and you don't have to do those check-ins all the time. So really it's about equipping, expectation setting, and then just having that open communication. So you can really, like I say, now at Simply Elegant, we have a really our planners, however long they've been in the industry, they go through a 40-hour training program online. And that teaches them the Simply Elegant way to plan. Because again, I've onboarded other planners that just plan differently from us. If we're giving a brand experience, like I want them to understand how we write emails, what language we use, things like that. You don't have to be like in the intensive, I literally show everybody, like, here's my stuff, like behind the curtain, here are all my SOPs, here's what it looks like. You see everything. And it took me 5 years to build that. Like it didn't happen overnight. And it can be that sophisticated, but it also doesn't have to be. It's really about how do I convey the information for the person doing the job so they can understand what I need and perform it well. I've had people in our program that built their SOPs as they onboarded somebody. They literally Zoom recorded their training. That was their SOP. So then they only had to do that once, which I think that's such a great idea. And they had their, another person I was just talking to yesterday on a call, was having part of the person they were onboarding, their job was to write out and dictate what they were doing. So it was like, this is how I post on social media. This is how I hashtag strategy. This is how I find this. And they literally built their SOP because they were articulating how they were doing the work.
Yeah, that's what I have my virtual assistants do. If I don't already have a standard operating procedure, part of their job is to create one. And then I tell them, write an outline for now, because over the next 3 months, you're going to find more efficient ways to do this thing. Once you feel like you found the most efficient way to do it, then create a very detailed standard operating procedure on it.
Yep. And again, that's your way to do it. And if that works for your business, that's exactly the point.
Yeah, I think the whole, like, considering what's going to work for you, obviously it's the most important part. Some people, like it sounds like you, Ashley, are very, very detail oriented. What I found for me is I really enjoy making SOPs. I like creating processes, but I'm very bad at maintaining them. So what that leads to is a tendency to create overcomplication, just as like a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
But I've had to learn to really strip it down and streamline it, because I need fewer processes for me in order to manage them, until I can hire an integrator or someone who is more detail oriented to create more detailed SOPs.
And that's just a team that builds your team. Now we're getting around that, which is great. That's the real goal.
I need a team. I need a team to build my team. We were talking about leadership earlier, and that's actually something I've been, I have I have 2 Enneagram coaches. They're really like life coaches, business coaches, but we talk about it through their lens of the Enneagram. And leadership is something that we've talked about a lot, because I have my own mindset bullshit about that. Like, I'm a terrible leader because I'm not detail oriented. And they're like, well, you can hire people who can do that, right? It's just your job to set expectations, know your own strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, Ashley. So this has been such a fantastic episode. Thanks so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Of course.
I want you to tell my audience a little bit more about your program. I know that I think you said you wrapped up a beta version of this program, but tell us like what you have going on.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We took a big, we just listen, like at the Abundance Group, we listen to the community, we listen to what people are challenged with. And the thing that came out of 2020 was one that was a cash flow year problem, right? Like we just all of a sudden couldn't work. But we knew, and that problem like just appeared. Like we didn't have any foresight that was going to happen, right? I always joke, like I didn't have a pandemic plan in my employee handbook. I don't know if anybody else did here, but
no standard operating procedure.
No SOP around that. We didn't have any, ways that we know. And so the thing with that is like, the power of where we're at now, as we're recording this in May, in the spring, summer of 2021, we know our next challenge in the wedding world and in a lot of our worlds is because we got a lot of that work that kind of stopped, but it's going to start up again. Like we're going to have this wave, businesses are going to start, like we're going to get back to life. And I think the thing is, we know the next problem on our docket is time. Time is going to be the problem. Like, how am I going to execute this many contracts? How am I going to onboard this many new clients? And so for us, it was like, man, a no-brainer that, again, we don't want you to be at your 100%. We want you to get your 80%. So that's where Dad and I were like, we need to build a program. And I think the thing about, because building your team is such a big, sensitive topic and it's hard and there's a lot of mindset issues around it, we didn't want to just build a course and then go like, have that one, you have it when you can, and then there's no one-on-one conversation back and forth. So what we built instead, it's actually a 12-week intensive. Think about like a mastermind where you go through the program in these 12 weeks with other people, but then you also get one-on-one coaching. We actually do one-on-one coaching in the program. So like the first week is mindset. The second week we bring in our legal panel, and Braden was on that for us, where we talk all about mostly independent contractor versus employee and contracts and all that good stuff. Next week we talk about team structure. Then we go into like, where do you find people? Like, how do you actually find and hire talent? Then we talk about onboarding them. We talk about affordability. We talk about, like I say, all these different things, and we really lock in. And for the last 3 weeks, we talk about leadership and how to refine your leadership skill set. We talk about care versus candor. We talk about in hiring, like we teach the 3 C's. So it's all about how we can bring these components together to hire a really great person. Because if we hire a great person, it makes the process so much easier. If we hire the wrong person, that's where it becomes clunky. Like let's avoid that. So we teach things like that. And then again, in leadership, we teach how everybody can refine their leadership skills. Introvert, extrovert, analytical mind versus creative dreamer. Like we all can be fantastic leaders, and we all have different things that we can work on. And it's a lot around communication. It's a lot about, the balance between, I call it friendly but firm. Like, how do you find that sweet spot? And having difficult conversations, conflict management. Like we teach on all of those things. And the great part is, again, you're going through in a group setting, a live teaching. So we actually teach live, and you're in the chat. People light up our Zooms, which we love. And we go back and forth between teaching and questions. And then you also have one-on-one coaching. So throughout the program, you have a coaching call where you can use in the beginning of the program, the middle of the program, the end of the program, whatever it fits your business best. And then also the program you get, I think we keep adding more, but because we keep trying to like figure out exactly. So we have like, I think it's like 30 or 40 different tools. So these are like checklists, like you talked about, templates, email templates. My dad wrote, he always says like, this is so silly that I love this so much, but he wrote, we hired at the Abundance Group, like we're hiring the team. And we had a hire where we're trying to decide between 2 candidates. And we really liked both of them. But inevitably we decided to go with the candidate we hired, and we adore her and she's a perfect fit for us. There was another gal who we really loved, and it was really hard for us to say like, sorry, but we went a different direction. And my dad, for those of you that know my dad is like whip smart, but like just a sweet Papa Bear dad. Like he's so nice and so kind. And he was like, I have to write this email. Like, what do I don't want to write this. Like no one wants, even if you've done it forever, you don't want to write it. But he wrote the most beautiful email to her and talked about, highlighted her strengths and just why we went a different direction. It was like every person who's ever been told no wanted to get this email. And, I said, do you think she'll write back? And he's like, no, of course she's not gonna write back. But he said, no, like she's off doing her life. And actually, because of what a good job he did with this, she wrote back and she was like, this was the most kind email. I am so grateful to be able to have, interviewed with you. And I truly, let me know I can continue to support you and talk about what you're doing at the Abundance Group. I'm like, what a powerful email. So like that template is in the intensive. You get like that actual email dad sent, and you get to really use it to have these really difficult, because there's difficult moments like firing somebody or saying like no, like those aren't fun ever. But we do things like that. So we have tools like that in the intensive you get to, but really it's to give you a complete firm foundation to make sure that you're equipped to build your team well. And then the sky's the limit. So that's what we try to do. And again, it's a 12-week program done with you, not just taught at you. It's really done with you collaboratively, which is really cool.
So if people want to learn more about your program, I don't know, like if it's open for registration, or maybe they want to get on a wait list or just learn more, do you have a link they should go to?
Yeah, actually, you can head to theabundance.group/team. And either if we are in application mode, or we're currently taking applications, which happens about 2 weeks before. So the really cool thing we also do is when you fill out the application, we actually do a one-on-one call, and we ask you where your business is at. Again, we ask them some questions just to make sure they're actually ready to build a team. And if you're not, we just say, hey, let's connect in our next registration. Here's a couple of things you can do in the interim. And then you ask any questions, which is great, because I think before you make an investment, to have that one-on-one was phenomenal. So that happens. Like I say, we open applications about a month before the program starts. So either if you open that up and we're taking applications, awesome, apply like right now. But then otherwise you get on the wait list. If there'll be kind of a page that says like, hey, you want to join the wait list. That's a perfect place to go. And again, it's theabundance.group/team.
Okay, awesome. So we'll make sure to get that in the show notes for sure. And then final question for you is how I end every episode. I have a free Facebook group, Braden's Besties. All of our listeners need to make sure that they're in that group. But if someone wants to become besties of you, Ashley, or of the Abundance Group, maybe they're not ready to hire, they're a newer business owner, but they want to soak up all of your knowledge and goodness, where should they go to do that?
Yeah, Instagram. Honestly, like we have so many awesome free resources if you're just starting to think about it. And again, that question that we had about like affordability, and you're at like 50% and you're getting excited. Like we have some great free tools where you can really, again, just learn mindset stuff about building a team, but also just connect with us in the DMs. Like just let us know, like, hey, here's where I'm at. What would be a good resource? We'll point you in the right direction. Again, free. We're happy to do that. But Instagram, and we're just the Abundance Group on Instagram. So super easy.
Beautiful. All right, Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, of course, Braden. Thanks for having me.
Hey there, before you go, I wanted to give a quick thanks. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. If you loved it, I would love for you to take a screenshot of the episode or snap a quick selfie while you are listening. Share it on social and give me a tag. It'll help other kick-ass entrepreneurs like yourself find the show. That's it for today. I'll be back soon with a new episode. Meanwhile, let's roll up our sleeves and unfuck that biz.